is you want to find the sponsor as early in the game as possible. So I tell people that regularly because I think some people don't fully understand what a sponsor is, and others don't fully understand how important it is. So one of the mistakes I made is that when I was looking at deals just a few months after I started doing this, I had a potential deal that made sense, but I didn't have a sponsor. And I was reaching out to people kind of cold calling at that point. And I don't know if you've ever had that experience, but generally speaking, when you're looking at 7-figure loans, nobody's going to give you their professional reputation without knowing who you are. So I would encourage people to go out there and be building sponsor relationships at all times. Starting out, you'll want to have at least 2 or 3 good ones that you can rely on. So that way, when you do have a deal that makes sense, you can present them with those deals and say, listen, Mr. or Mrs. Sponsor, what do you think of this one?
Welcome to the Wealth Through Real Estate Investing podcast, your source for real-world strategies focused on creating long-term wealth, cash flow, and financial freedom through real estate. Through guidance, tips, and stories of highly successful real estate investors and thought leaders, we provide you the tools to succeed and reach the lifestyle you always wanted. And now your host, Dwaine Clarke.
Hello and welcome to the Wealth Through Real Estate Investing podcast. This is your host, Dwaine Clarke. And today we have Charles Seaman. Charles currently serves as managing member and lead acquisition person of Three Oaks Management. Charles, thank you so much for joining us on the show. How you doing, my friend?
Very good, Dwayne. Thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure to be a guest on the show. Been very good. I was just traveling back from New York last night, and I was fortunate that my plane got off the ground and made it home right before midnight and back to work today.
Yes, as we was kind of talking, we have a huge snowstorm that happened in the last 2 days, and have a ton of snow. My son's school got canceled today. He still has basketball practice, but it's a little bit of different atmospheres, as I understand. You're in North Carolina, right?
Yes, it's definitely one of the reasons I came down here. So I'm a native New Yorker, and 6 months ago I moved down to Charlotte. Part of the reason for doing that was the warmer climate because I wanted to escape that.
Yes, my wife can complain about that all the time. Well, awesome. Yep. So we know that about you. If you don't mind sharing for the audience a little bit about your background, how you got started in real estate.
Sure, absolutely. So for the last 14 years, I was very fortunate to work for a commercial real estate investor in New York. And I was kind of a friend of the family. When I started there, I was only 20 years old. Didn't have a ton of direction in my life, and it was more or less just a job that paid the bills at that point. And as I got more involved with it, I took on more and more roles and did a lot of different things. And I was fortunate to work very closely with a very successful investor, so I picked up a lot of practical experience from working with them. The guy that I worked for actually had a few different businesses. He had a plumbing company, some commercial real estate, and some bars and restaurants. So it gave me exposure to different industries and a lot of different contacts. And out of those things, I realized, for me personally, I always gravitated more towards the real estate side because, not to say that real estate's easy, but it's a heck of a lot easier than being in the construction industry, that's for sure. And there's pretty good money in it. So if you're good at developing relationships and you're persistent, you can probably have the tools that it takes to be successful in real estate.
Beautiful. Yeah, just kind of speaking with your role, Three Oaks Management, is that a team that you're working with, and everyone has a different role? I understand that you are on the kind of the acquisition side of that of the team, right?
Yes, that's correct. So the Three Oaks is actually when we came up with the name it was rather random, but myself and 2 other guys, Adam Bolsinger and Wayne Bolsinger, father and son combination, and the 3 of us got together because we felt we could do more collaboratively than we could individually. Initially, when we first started working on syndication, I had a full-time job. My partner Adam had and still has a business full-time that he operates. And Wayne's a retired CFO that also functions in a similar capacity for us. So the Three Oaks was kind of meant to symbolize each of us being one of the Three Oaks. And I handle really broker relations and acquisitions. My partner Adam's in charge more so of market research and investor relations. And Wayne is similar to the roles that he served in the past, more of a CFO type capacity for us.
Beautiful. Yeah. So we talk about a lot of different strategies as far as kind of the syndication business. But the big thing is, of course, when I talk to a lot of investors that we interview, is finding deals. So I understand you looking at a tremendous amount of deals. Can you kind of take us through your process of, building relationships with brokers, or finding deals directly? What's kind of like your primary source of deal flow?
Yes, absolutely. So most of the deals that I look at are usually 100 units plus. And my reason for that is because I really want deals that could support full-time staff. If it's something that's local to the Charlotte area, like when I say local, within maybe 30 to 45 minutes of Charlotte, then we'll definitely go smaller with the expectation that we may need to get involved a little more with the management. But being that we're dealing with deals that are usually 100 units and up, our primary way of getting them is really through broker relationships. Because any reputable deal of that size almost always goes exclusively through brokers.
Hmm.
So once you start getting relationships with the listing brokers like the Cushman and Wakefields and CBREs and companies like that, then you'll have a really good chance of getting deals without without having a middleman involved. That's basically what I'm saying on that.
Mm.
So starting out, you may not get that attention. You may need to start with smaller boutique brokerages and build up from there. And any broker can be a valuable relationship, because just because somebody's not working for a Marcus and Millichap or a Cushman and Wakefield or something like that doesn't mean they don't have value. It's just finding somebody who's willing to work with you and send you legitimately off market deals in a lot of cases. And some cases on market deals that make sense, but nowadays those are tougher and tougher to come by.
Hmm.
So, so one of the things that I do to build relationships is we go out and we take brokers out for lunches or dinners, because we find that that's a great way just to sit down and get in front of them and get them to remember who you are.
Mm. Are you kind of finding brokers through like social media, or are you like searching online for a deal? You download a package, kind of start that process, or is it someone local in your market that you start from there?
So the initial thing we did is actually identify our markets, and that took some time to come down to, because initially we hadn't done that for the first year we were operating our business, and we realized we wasted a lot of time by going to a lot of different markets and meeting people all over again. So after we identified our target areas, which are really the Carolinas and the Atlanta markets, then we sought out brokers in those markets that were willing to work with us and bring us deals. And now that we've done a deal and we're actively looking for another one, uh, now we're actually seeking out specific relationships within bigger brokers like Cushman and Wakefield's and CBREs, because we realize for us that's the next step, and we want to build good relationships with them where we get on their VIP buyer list. You're on the priority list of getting the good deals. So
Hmm.
it takes some time, because with these brokers, obviously, they have a lot of people that are coming to them, a lot of people that are contacting them from all different parts of the country, and they don't know who's real and who's not. So they have to screen you somewhat and make sure that you actually have the capacity to close, because if you don't, then it really sours their reputation and they look bad when they bring it to the sellers.
Of course. You had mentioned North Carolina and parts of Georgia. What else is part of your acquisition criteria for when you guys looking for deals?
So our main criteria is really B or C assets in either A, B, or C areas. If it's outside of Charlotte, we like the property to be 100 units or up, solely for the fact that it supports full-time staff, because we want to make sure that there's eyes and ears watching the property at all times, or at least all reasonable times anyway. And if it's within the Charlotte MSA, we'll go as small as 20 units, just because we have the ability to be a little more involved if we need to. Uh, Generally speaking, we look for properties 1978 built or newer, just for the fact that we don't have to worry about lead plumbing. And generally speaking, you don't have too much aluminum wiring after that either. So those are two things we try to stay away from.
Okay, yeah, awesome. Can you kind of take us through maybe like one of your most recent deals that you worked on, or something that you're targeting right now, and then maybe kind of
Yeah,
give the listeners kind of a snapshot of kind of what you guys are working on?
sure. So I'll use the 92 unit deal right outside of Atlanta that we closed in September. So that one there was actually an on-market deal. A rather unique situation. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Cardinal Properties, um, but that refers to the type of construction. And what happens is with those properties, they're not usually the easiest to get financing with. You can get financing, but you're definitely not going to get 80% agency debt.
Hmm.
And that throws a lot of buyers off, especially when they go in there with that unrealistic expectation. So this was an on-market deal, and our sponsor, Steve, who's based out of the Atlanta market, he had a good rapport with the seller, and he was also known by a lot of people in the area because he does deals there regularly. The seller specifically wanted a buyer that had experience with Cardinal Properties, and Steve had just closed on a 454 unit two-property Cardinal portfolio back in February. So when we initially looked at this deal, it was late August, early May, and by early June we had it under contract. Out of all the offers that came in, we were actually the lowest offer out there, but we were the only one that had somebody on our team with experience with Cardinal Properties. So that was very important for the seller because he didn't want to tie the property up for a month or two only to realize that the buyer was going to terminate the contract for not being able to get financing like they thought. Went with our offer.
Yeah,
So
that's very important to, have someone that has that experience because again, sellers are looking for certainty of close and not want to waste their time dealing with a buyer that's going to tie them up and then end up finding out that they're not able to execute. Can you kind of explain again for the audience what is, Cardinal Properties?
absolutely. So Cardinal Property refers to the type of construction that they're single-story prefabricated buildings. They were built in the 70s, 80s, and 90s by a company called Cardinal. And basically the benefit to them from a tenant standpoint is that one, they're single story, so there's nobody above them. Two, they all have a private parking space right in front of the unit. And three, they have a little patio area. So it's almost like having a mini townhouse to an extent. From an ownership standpoint, the benefit is that there's lower turnover than there are in conventional multifamily apartments. So that's a plus. And generally speaking, you have less kids on the property and less riffraff because your tenant base is usually single working people and also elderly people that just want the amenities of not having a ton of kids on the property.
Yeah, that's very nice. Okay, cool. As far as kind of like the amount of deals that you're probably looking through, I know you work with a lot of different brokers, looking at a lot of different packages. What would you say, like in your experience, how many deals that you looked at to you guys considering taking offer, and then how competitive is the market right now that you guys are
The market's insane. That's probably putting it mildly.
in?
Yeah. Prior to getting that one, we had looked at somewhere between 150 and 200 deals. And I know a lot of people say they look at 100, and I would say that a couple of years ago that was probably the case, but somebody just starting out now, I think you're going to be expecting to look at a lot more than that just due to the increased competition because of how late we are in the cycle.
Hmm.
So, after you get that first one under your belt, I think you shorten that learning curve a lot the next time. So hopefully we're not looking at 200 deals more to find another deal.
Hmm.
But you have a lot of competition. There's a lot of people out there who could afford to pay prices that I know our group personally can't and won't because we have investors coming in that we have to make them money, otherwise they'll never invest with us again.
Of course.
But you have groups with a lot of money, institutional investors, equity groups that don't even care so much about making a decent return, but it's more somewhere they just need somewhere to park the money. And because of that, they're able to pay much higher prices than we are. And in most of the desirable markets, they're able to gobble these things up a lot faster than we are. So there's definitely a lot of looking and a lot of competition. I wouldn't let that discourage anybody, but I would say, just be more persistent.
Mm. And as far as kind of like the future, are you guys going to look at other additional markets as well, or you just kind of gonna you have a good foothold in these two markets here, and just gonna kind of expand on what you have?
So our goal is actually both. So personally, myself and my two partners, we're really staying in the Carolinas and Atlanta just because we're still building our foothold in these. But what we're also doing is taking on people who would potentially be interested in working with us and teaching them how to do things in different markets. So what that does is it increases the amount of deals that we're able to look at. Because while I may only have time to underwrite so many deals, we can teach other people how to do the same thing, and now they're able to do that themselves, and then essentially bring us the deals. So if we get anything that they bring to us, we'll bring them in as a partner, and they get to be involved in the deal and put that on their track record as well. But it increases the amount of deals that come across our desk in different markets.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mentioned like, starting out, you look at so many deals until kind of that learning curve kind of, maybe you'll be a little bit quicker, or you don't have to look at as many that you can kind of tell like this is going to work or not going to work. You got to give some advice for people that's starting off in the syndication business, as far as kind of looking at deals, maybe approach that help you or something that you would have did differently if you could do it over again.
Yes, there's a couple of things I would have done differently. You learn from your mistakes. So my first one is I would have chosen a target market sooner. So there's a few things that just about everybody tells you starting out, and some people follow instructions and others learn by making mistakes. I definitely learned by making mistakes.
Mhm.
So I would definitely have chosen a target market sooner. That was a mistake. Initially, our target market was rather large. My partners and I were looking at pretty much anything east of the Mississippi River.
Mm.
So that covers a lot of ground.
Yeah.
And like one time I looked at a deal in Indiana, another time in Ohio, two in Kentucky. My partner did one in Tennessee. So every time you go into a new market, you're somewhat starting from scratch because you need to build new relationships, new broker contacts, new property managers, and nobody knows who you are. So you're not going to get good deals until people have an idea who you are and they have some credibility. So it was almost a year in that we decided, after bidding on a lot of deals and unsuccessfully not getting them, we decided, why don't we pick a target market and be smarter about it? So since then, it's definitely honed our reach because now we're able to have more consistent relationships. And that's one thing I would tell people starting out. A second thing I would say is you want to find the sponsor as early in the game as possible. So I tell people that regularly because I think some people don't fully understand what a sponsor is, and others don't fully understand how important it is. So one of the mistakes I made is that when I was looking at deals just a few months after I started doing this, I had a potential deal that made sense, but I didn't have a sponsor. And I was reaching out to people kind of cold calling at that point. And I don't know if you've ever had that experience, but generally speaking, when you're looking at seven-figure loans, nobody's going to give you their professional reputation without knowing who you are. So I would encourage people to go out there and be building sponsor relationships at all times. Starting out, you'll want to have at least 2 or 3 good ones that you can rely on. So that way, when you do have a deal that makes sense, you can present them with those deals and say, listen, Mr. or Mrs. Sponsor, what do you think of this one?
Those are great points. I'm glad you said that. And like I said, it makes a lot of sense. And like I said, definitely will be helping a lot of people. Awesome. So just kind of learn a little bit more about you. I know that I said that you do a lot of work on the acquisition side, but what's kind of typical workday for you? And do you have any special morning routines?
Can't say that I have any special morning routine. Most days when I get up, I usually start working pretty early, and I usually am pretty late. So it's more or less. At some point, they probably would need to develop a little more structure to it. But at this point, being we're still a relatively small operation, my role is to be on the phone with brokers as often as I can, and to see what deals I can bring in. So sometimes, generally speaking, I try to schedule calls in advance if I can, but sometimes it happens where somebody calls you midday and you wind up on the phone for half an hour, and that's just part of the game. And you rearrange your schedule as needed. So if something becomes a bigger priority, then you have to adjust.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Awesome. What can you say that you're most grateful for?
I'm most grateful for a lot of things. One would be health, just because once you don't have that, you really appreciate that. And I say that only because my mother is sick and disabled, so I can really appreciate having my health because it's something that sometimes we take for granted. And the second thing is to have opportunity. The opportunity to go out there and be in the real estate business and to be in the syndication business in particular. I always say one great thing about syndication. So for anybody who's listening to the show that's a big fan of Robert Kiyosaki or just about any of the other financial gurus out there, it's constantly saying that you want to use OPM, other people's money. So I always say syndication is the ultimate way of doing that. There's probably no better legal way of using other people's money and making a win-win scenario out of it for everybody.
Beautiful. Well said. So how do we get in contact with you, Charles?
Sure. I'll give you a few ways. First way is by phone. I'll give you my cell numbers, 347-306-3278. Then also on social media. You can get me on Twitter, CSEAMAN316. LinkedIn, I believe my LinkedIn handle is also the same. Otherwise, you can search for me by name, Charles Seaman, SEAMAN. Also on Bigger Pockets or by email, CSEAMAN316@gmail.com.
Beautiful. Charles, it was like I said, a pleasure to speak with you, and I love that he kind of broke down kind of your process of looking at deals, analyzing deals. And of course, the biggest takeaway for me is knowing your market, getting that done early, and kind of establishing that instead of kind of going around and looking all over the place, and kind of hone in and concentrating in order to build those relationships and, establish there. And then also looking for sponsors early, establishing those relationships until till the time you find a deal, then you'll be able to present it and be able to put together a partnership and create a win-win situation.
Yeah,
Charles,
that sums it up in a nutshell.
yes, absolutely. So it was a pleasure speak with you. Happy post-Thanksgiving. Enjoy the rest of your week, and we'll look forward to connecting again soon.
Yes, thank you very much, Dwaine, for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to be a guest on the show.
Take care, my friend.
You too.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of the Wealth Through Real Estate Investing podcast. Don't forget to subscribe and leave us a review on iTunes or the listening platform of your choice. Also, please check us out at DwaineLClarke.com, as well as find us on Facebook for more useful content and resources.